Hello, guys. We have a special guest here with us today for this episode of the Border of Passion podcast, and we're talking Newcastle today. So the man's got his top on, so I'll let him introduce himself. Go on, mate.
Thanks for having me. If you guys don't know me, my name is Rimedi. I make TikToks. I'm just out here. So yeah, thanks for having me on. We're gonna be talking Newcastle, my favorite club in the whole world right now. Let's go.
Let's go. I'm a bit disappointed that the wall isn't in the background, but it is what it is. We'll have to deal with we'll have to
I
deal
know,
with
I
it.
know, I know.
But yeah, let's go straight into it. So Newcastle, big club, but a bit of a fallen giant in terms of many ways, but now seem to be a bit oily. A lot of money
Yeah.
being pumped into it. What are you guys thinking? Tell me what you're thinking, guys.
Well, for me, in general, I think most people are like kind of happy for them, happy for them. A lot of some people are like not. I don't think jealousy is the word, but like they have a weird vibe towards it. I think all the Premier League clubs have had a like weird look on it. I think in general, it's good that there's another competitor, so it'll be like more interesting. But in general, it was a deal that was meant to happen last year or the year before, but the Premier League have held it down. So it's good for like guys like Joe Willock and stuff. But for me, like I'm not really scared or shying away from Newcastle right now, anyways.
Go on, George.
Yeah, no, I think weird in terms of like the moral argument for some stuff, but I just think fundamentally when you've got another big club that's got resources, I get excited. Like for me, I love competition, and I don't like stale in terms of really the spectrum of talent, right? So for me, having another big player with a destination just means that the league gets more competitive. So from like a competitive standpoint, I love it. Morally, I do struggle, and I'm sure like we'll dive into what you would accept as a fan and how you could support. But I think for Newcastle, like in terms of their history and in terms of, what they may deserve or not, like in quotes and unquotes, I mean, I think it's one of the top clubs that, people would look to say it's really nice to have them resurge. I think a lot of top teams right now have owners that don't invest and aren't necessarily involved as much as they would like. And so I think it's nice that there's a little bit of catharsis from a lot of top six club fans, in my opinion, that can at least look elsewhere in the league and be like, that's what we would like. It's a dream situation in that sense. I honestly think that it could be very, very interesting. I feel it's going to be the most successful of the respectfully B-Tech clubs to gain money. And what I mean by that is, your Evertons, even in terms of your West Ham now that are now in Europe, and even Aston Villa, like those types of teams that have gained money in the past year or two, I think have been unsuccessful to date. I don't think that's going to be the case with Newcastle because I feel they have a lot better structure. And I think if the owners kind of follow in the same path as a Man City, their decisions are going to be a lot more football based as opposed to just injecting money to solve, because I really push back on the idea that money solves your issues. Smart decisions solve your issues, not money. So yeah, no, mate, I'm ecstatic for fans of Newcastle, but I'm also ecstatic for what it means from a competitive standpoint because they're a big fan base, man. Like, and even their stadium is huge. Just to have that energy back in the club, it's big. It's big for me. So no, I'm excited.
Yeah, come on, mate. What do you think so far? How are you feeling about it so far, already?
To be honest, like you guys mentioned it perfectly. I think when it comes to big sums of money coming into a club, it's all about, okay, you have money now, but it's about what you can do with said money, because we've seen in the past, you've seen teams go on crazy transfer splurges and not receive the best. So I know we're going to come onto it later, but it really starts with the recruitment and how when you're faced with this new sort of situation, how can Newcastle react and say, okay, we have a plan, we have a strategy, what can we do with this said money? Because we've seen it at Man City. It took, I think, so they got taken over in 2008. Their first quote unquote successful transfer window where they started to look towards the spine of their team was 2010 when they signed Yaya Toure, David Silva. Jerome Boateng at that moment was a good signing, but obviously he didn't work out. And that was the first time that they looked towards the spine of their team. And then 2011, 2012, they signed all the pieces missing, and then they won the league in 2012. But it's going to take a few years. We can't expect success overnight with Newcastle because they're currently fighting relegation, and who knows, they might not even stay up this year. Like all this, like 300 billion worth of assets in the Saudi crown, like that Saudi family. But if they're not even in the Premier League, like, yeah, it's gonna look like a shambles. So really and truly, you need to set targets, like smaller targets, and then look towards the bigger ones in the future.
So, I mean, of course I agree with literally, in terms of the facts, those are you guys have pretty much just said what the facts are. For me, I'm happy for Newcastle because when I was growing up, so early 2000s, you had the Shearers, the Solanos, and even you had Colaccini, you had Gutierrez. They had good players. You had Shea Given, who was one of the better keepers in the league. They did have teams, and they did flirt with the Champions League in Europe and things like this. And they are a team that I do respect. But I want to mention this. I want to get your guys' thoughts on this as well. So, if you look at the degree of difference here we're talking between, I think it's like 24.7 million for Man City, and you go up to 300 million at one point. What point do you start to think, hang on a second, maybe we need to start, if you're going to have that massive a difference, do you guys think anything like, for example, a salary cap or transfer limits or things like this? Because when you're getting to the point where, like, teams like City, because I've been saying this in the past as well, if you have teams like City and you have teams like United, even us as Arsenal fans, if you can put enough talent and leave enough talent on the bench so other teams can't get players, are you not taking away some of the competitive edge in the league? So what would you think on, for example,
you can't put a salary cap in a league that goes in with other leagues. So if it was a closed league like the Super League, maybe they could do it. But in the Prem, you can't put a salary cap. Say you put a salary cap of like 100 million. No, that's too low. But like 300 million a year between each team, and then they try to exceed that. Players will just start leaving the Premier League and going to other leagues where they can just get more and more money. So you can't really put a salary cap in the Premier League to limit them. But financial fair play hasn't done anything.
Hasn't done it. And my thing is when you have the most attractive, in terms of endorsements and the actual prestige of the league, surely you can say, look, everyone wants to be in this league. If you want to be in this league, you have to, you can impose impose more sort of restrictions on how, or to keep the parity of the league and actually improve the league even further.
To be honest, Curran, what I think we do though as fans is we tend to, if you're talking about parity of the league right now, I look at players like Boubakary Soumaré. Look, Newcastle have new funds, right? But the January before, they were offering more money for Boubakary Soumaré to come over. And, they definitely had the funds, and they were rejected based on a certain level of prestige and perceived project, right? Like, and I think when you're going after players, money doesn't guarantee you the transfer. It opens the door. Of course, more money does that. The Premier League as a product, more money, it opens the door to negotiations to maybe players you wouldn't consider. But I think if you're looking at youngsters and actual ceiling and getting the transfers over the line, a lot of those have to be pushed through with your project. And so I think the big reason that, Man City, kind of was able to really ride that out was, they have Pep as a manager. I think it really depends on what type of manager that you guys bring in. I think those things matter a little bit more than necessarily the backing or the financial state behind the club, in a sense, because I think players are going to make decisions not just based off money. And I think players that are young players are going to look at what their projection is with this team. What's the pathway? If you're going down that route, if you want to get, a James Rodriguez situation. I don't think it's great, but I don't think that moves the club forward. That would be representative of a bad decision, in my opinion, like a name star that you pay a lot of money towards that isn't invested in the project. Like it has similar detrimental effects, even if you were to receive that player. So for me, I don't think parity matters, to be honest with you. I think it'll bring more competition to the league, but fundamentally, Newcastle make good decisions. Their projects are going to succeed. Whether or
Yeah.
not you have massive financial states that back you, I don't think that really matters. You know, I look at Everton with Usmanov, who's among one of the top billionaires in the world of football, and Everton themselves, in terms of their transfer, policy,
It
they
won't
have
be.
money. It's never been a case of them not really having money. They just make horrible decisions.
Yeah,
And in
horrible
fact,
decisions.
let's use a top six example, guys, like Manchester United. The fact that you're giving those kind of wages to Ronaldo in terms of the team, is that the most balancing act in terms of what they needed? You know, they do this a lot, and so for me, whether it's a mid-table example in Everton, whether it's a Manchester United example where they buy stars and assets that they decline, and it does have an effect on them being able to buy players. Guys, like Declan Rice wasn't pursued, or a DM wasn't pursued because of the fact that their wage bill and cap after Ronaldo was too big. They had the money. No one doesn't believe that Manchester United didn't have the money to buy these players, but it does make an impact on their squad allocation. So, yeah, whether it's Big Six, whether it's mid-table, like we have examples of clubs with huge money that make poor decisions and don't advance. So for me, I think the money is kind of a non-issue. It's more about getting people in charge that make good decisions.
I mean, I'm going to ask Rimedi this because personally, the other thing I wanted to make sure I got that point out there, because there's a lot of clamor for independent regulators and these kinds of things. And when the Super League came about, I was very much in the case of literally everyone's evil. The TV companies are evil, the owners are evil, and the Premier League itself they're all trying to get as much money out of you as possible. So why be loyal to one side here? Just try and get the best product out for yourself. So what I'm going to ask Rimedi is, if now this money is coming in, how do you, if you say you're the director of the Premier League, how do you respond in terms of trying to counterbalance and try to make sure everyone is okay with this Newcastle takeover?
I think we've seen today that there have been reports that, I'm not sure like how accurate they are, but all 19 clubs were like they don't want the takeover to happen, because there's such a level of parity. There's such a big gap between Sheikh Mansour, who's I think 23 billion. So he was initially the richest owner in football. And then you go into Mohammed bin Salman, and the Saudi Crown Prince and the Public Investment Fund, and that is 300 million or billion, sorry. So the Premier League is the symbol and the resemblance of capitalism, and whatever mechanism or structure that generates even more money for the Premier League, why would they say no? And the Premier League, the Super League, they're all as corrupt, quote unquote corrupt, as each other. Because you remember throughout the whole Super League process, Sky Sports, who tend to have a geo-lock on all of their
everything.
Content. So, somehow people all over the world were able to watch Sky Sports on YouTube and on Twitter. And when it affects the Premier League's pockets, they're quick to shut it down. But this situation, it brings tourism to the country, so the government are all going to be for it. The Premier League brings them money because obviously there's all these eyeballs, and you have in the whole of the Middle East say, okay, we have another team to support apart from Man City. So the Premier League wouldn't say no. The UK government won't say no. It's only the Premier League clubs that are rejecting it, mainly because that they think that there's this complete difference in terms of how much money that Newcastle have to spend. But the Premier League don't care. They want it. It's another source of income. Why not for them?
Yeah, I mean, for me, if especially with this season, you look at teams like Crystal Palace and Brighton and Wolves, and you see that there's an edge to these teams now. They're not just like mid-table. When they meet the top six, they just fold, and when they meet the bottom clubs, they win and they stay mid-table. There's a bite to like we found out against Brighton. Like there's a bite to these clubs now. They're well-run clubs. If you look at Crystal Palace, for example, they've got the likes of Gallagher and Zaha, Elise. They've got Iguahi. They've got great talents. Even Southampton are surprising me with Livramento. Like their recruitment in these middle clubs has improved a lot. So when you look at, say, oh, the money is going to be the money is everything. Well, no, because if you run correctly,
all the clubs in the league now, they all have money. Like the way the league has, the Prem was set up in comparison to like La Liga and all this stuff was set up so that the small clubs can get close to the same amount as the bigger clubs do when all the money is like set out and trickled down. Like the team that finishes 20th gets like 90 mil reward money from the Prem.
Yeah.
So you still get a lot of like
it's capitalism at its finest, like fundamentally, you know, and it's this idea that anybody has the opportunity to get to that level. And I think that equal playing field is what a lot of fans just fundamentally agree with. The only thing I will say is, look, like I have a huge moral issue with how that money was obtained. And I'm consistent where myself, even if Arsenal were to be bought by somebody like that, I'd have very trouble backing that decision from a moral ground in terms of, I agree that there's a lot of billionaire venture capitalists that, you know, morally aren't there. But for me, there is a line in terms of some of the human rights issues for me that I'm okay with accepting. But in terms of the Premier League, it doesn't matter to them because they get more money. Like in terms of an actual business decision, they're very separate for me than the moral ground. And that's where I draw a line personally, where I think the Premier League, it's always good. In terms of a fan, if I want competitive edge, it's good. You know, you're getting competitiveness there. But morally, in terms of what I could accept from a line, I do think that they're slightly different in terms of how they achieve their money. So I am really hesitant on, personally, and this is my personal line, because again, even if Arsenal were to get those owners, I wouldn't be in support of this, which may be different to a lot of people, but I just couldn't deal with that moral ground, because for me, I feel like I'm accepting that, but competitively, the product's better. You know, you're looking at, you know, another team that's increasing the competitive edge. So
the smaller teams will get more money from this because the TV money.
It's a trickle down effect, right?
Yeah, the TV money will increase. They'll even start buying the smaller teams better players.
But that's how they'll do it, because they can't buy the top talents. When I mentioned Boubakary Samare, where I use him as an example of a top talent in his position that will still reject most likely a club if they don't feel that the project is great. And you know, what Newcastle will do, or rather what they should do, is poach the best talents outside the top 10 and then build themselves to a level so that they're in the top 10 and then competing, and then you go for those talents. Like there's a couple levels that you need to go. And that trickle down money effect is exactly why I felt that when you inject money into the system, everyone benefits. Like that's the basis of capitalism. Not to get too textbook in terms of like money and influx, but that's the very basis of it. So yeah, I'm excited.
Palace have benefited from teams that Man United spending 50 mil on Wan-Bissaka and all this stuff. So that the lower teams will benefit, and like the Prem is so much better set up for a team to do this than a La Liga, for example, because the money's coming back to you. Because say you win, say you get like 11 for something, you get 100+ mil. So you're getting reward money for not winning, but like in like La Liga, you get 90 mil for finishing fourth. But in the Prem, you get more for winning the championship. In England, you get more for winning the championship. So it's all set up for these teams to keep climbing, and the TV money will increase, that reward money will increase. All these lower teams will get better players, more money from a Newcastle, for example. Like Newcastle are in a good position now. It seems they're in a good position now. It seems, because you never know how proactive the owner will be. Because the owner could come in and say, "I want it all. I'm going to spend on the best director I can get, best managers, best coaches, best doctors, best everything." Or he could be, "I have my club now. I'm here to chill and just let's keep going how we're going." Like you just don't know how this money is going to be used.
I think the manager tells you all that you need to know in terms of the potential for the club. So it really sets the tone for what they, you know, what they foresee as the project. right? Because that's the first example of a good decision or a bad decision. Like it's your first test. I personally, I don't place as much value, by the way, like in sporting director as much, in my opinion. I feel as though the manager is the crux to most teams. To be honest with you, I feel tactically in terms of his suggestions, typically when you look at these types of good managers like Graham Potter, I'm sure he's telling people where to go to in terms of, data recruitment, even in terms of his specific recruitment, Mwepo and how he profiles the Basuma, they're so similar that it's not just an analytics department. Like a manager has input at that level if you're good enough, right? And so for me, it's going to be the very first example of.
But some teams don't necessarily. Like Chelsea's the prime example of not really caring what the manager thinks. So you can get quality that way and win. It's been proven, but you are right in the sense that a manager generally would control who comes into the club, and because it will suit him tactically and put him in a better position to win. So if a manager is more involved, they have more like control and therefore more blame from the up and the fans.
But again, I think when you look at it though, they buy managers to win now, and that would tell you the direction of the club. You know what I mean? Like Chelsea, for example, like we know that they don't care necessarily about their manager's wishes, but a lot of times they buy the best available in the field in the moment. And for me, that would let me know what their decision making is for the project, like in terms of their infrastructure. Like their idea to win now would tell me a lot about how they view building Newcastle. For me, you build good foundations by redoing the data department, redoing, your domestic recruitment, making sure that, your data analysis is kind of new and improved. Like that's what City did. Like I don't know if people remember, like yes, they got Pep Guardiola. Yes.
They set up for him.
But they set up for him, yeah. Like they redid their entire scouting department. They redid their entire infrastructure in terms of domestic recruitment. Like, and that was before he came.
They even started getting people from Barcelona, like CT Bergerstein, who's still there now, just to set up for Pep. They got him in like 2012, and Pep came in 2017, 16?
2016.
Exactly. And so like there was a plan, and there was forward thought, and they even bought New York Red Bulls. Like they bought clubs for the purpose of a pathway to youth. Like these were decisions that any good football institution should make, right? I don't know if buying somebody like a Conte, like I don't say that they'll get them, but like a Conte is an example of a short-term fix, in my opinion, right? You can get like somebody similar that's in a B level quality-wise, but like that for me is the wrong decision in rebuilding the club. I would much rather they go the Graham Potter route in terms of a upcoming promising
100%.
young manager. And I just think those decisions are very different in terms of how you build a team, like in business or in life, right? So for me, it'll tell me a lot about their involvement, but it's really interesting. And, I think recruitment, I have ideas at what I would do. Maybe we could.
Yeah, that's literally, I was trying to get back to recruitment here, because personally, if I look at this Newcastle squad, I think you're going to probably do one as well, but I'm going to do a window by window issue with them for the next 3 or 4 years. I don't know if you're gonna do one as well, George, but I'm personally going to look at the next 3 or 4 windows and see what's going to go on. But if you look at their squad right now, what do they lack? I think they're lacking in midfield a bit. I think they're lacking in defense a bit. Midfielders, because I like Callum Wilson for what he is right now. I mean, sure, they've got Willock, who's been good for them, but are you really gonna put all your eggs in that basket? I mean, I don't like Shelvey, I can't lie to you, and Hayden in midfield isn't.
I think I really think that the best thing that Newcastle can do right now is basically build the spine of your team. Know me.
Literally my next point.
you got to build from the midfield for me and build out from the back. And so they do have to find a way to kind of balance their front line, which I don't think is quite balanced right now. I think it's very easy to double up on Ireland St. Maximin without Callum Wilson. Like Callum Wilson is critical to them being able to vary any kind of attack, right? And Joe Willock does really well to break the lines in different areas of the pitch, but he needs a focal point to kind of receive centrally. And when Callum Wilson is not available, it's very difficult for them to really have a variable attack. So I think there's been a lot of debate too. And, I think we'll have a podcast coming up in the future about where do you want to build in a rebuild. You know, a lot of people believe, do you start at the attack? I completely disagree. Like, I think a sustainable model is really building from the back and building from the spine. So, yeah, I would definitely start to recruit a young manager. I've said in the past, you know, Graham Potter and Marcelo Gallardo, both top picks from a foreign and domestic standpoint that I'm really big fans of if they were a manager. And then I would start building by getting the best defenders kind of within the league. So I'm talking, you know, Lewis Dunk, Ben Godfrey for me. You know, if you're looking at a Boubacar Kamara in terms of a free transfer, it would be unbelievable. Then for me within the league, I would also look at John McGinn, a very versatile, all-action midfielder that, you know, would really complement Joe Willock. And then if you have money left over, you buy somebody like an Anthony from Ajax, who is a young, up-and-coming youngster. And if you start to look at the spine of that team with an Anthony addition, who's probably your marquee signing, but then John McGinn would come at a very decent price, particularly with his contract situation. And, you know, he would jump at the chance for the next level. And then when you look at Boubacar Kamara, you know, he's in the last 6 months of his contract come January.
Yeah.
So
And
very
they have been in links with him the past year or so. So they have been talking to him because they tried to get Soumaré and it failed. And Kamara looked like their backup option. But there are options there, like young, cheap. Because if you do, say you get a Dunk, he's a bit older, but you need experience if you're going to go.
You need experience to back, right?
Yeah.
In my opinion, and you do need to balance some stuff. And I think what's awesome, at least in my opinion, is that when you start this way, especially if you get like a Graham Potter, that makes like a Lewis Dunk transfer a little bit easier to do. But look, I think that mix is a great domestic, but also foreign flair intrigue. Like, you know, and it's in very specific positions. So you recruit experience at the back within the league, but you know your domestic recruitment is surrounded by experienced players. So Kamara is experienced or surrounded by Godfrey, Dunk, Lascelles, Willock, McGinn. Like, if he's new to the league, which, you know, you don't know how that adaptation is going to go, it's really nice to be surrounded by domestic recruitment. And then for me, attacking additions can be foreign because I feel as though there's a level of unpredictability there. So you don't necessarily need within the league recruitments in an attacking sense.
I hope they build through their manager, like you said. I hope they do. If they're gonna go like to build young or to build through, they need to build like through a philosophy or a way they want their club to be, and not be like random or.
They need to build through Alan St. Maximin and Joe Willock. Let's be really specific here, because when you look at that crux of the team, make sure that you supply those two. Like you know, Alan St. Maximin is your superstar, but also Joe Willock was probably your biggest signing in the window. So if you're going to do that, support the man. Make sure that, you know, if he's in a 3, he's supported. And how do you do that? Get a all-action kind of semi-defensive, kind of right center mid 8 with a proper sitter. Let that man express himself and be the free man 8 that, you know, he needs to thrive. And yeah, look, if you wanted to add variation to the right, Anthony, again, I would say if I was them, Graham Potter or Marcelo Gallardo as your manager, I would strive to go make Anthony from Ajax. I would look for John McGinn as an
Ajax, come on, man, Ajax, man.
Anthony is cold, but please say it properly.
Bro, you
all right.
You know my idol, and you say this. You say Ajax. You say this to my face.
I have sympathy for you. Man.
It's North American thing, but no, like legitimately, like on actual players, Anthony.
I told you so many times.
Anthony, McGinn, Kamara on a very cheap deal, and then I would go for experience at the back, Lewis Dunk and Ben Godfrey. I think that changes the profile of that team. I do think that window is probably £120 million window, but very feasible with your new backing. Like, I mean, and these are players that I don't think are at that upper echelon of talent that you would be worried about them committing in terms of the project. Like, I think you're recruiting the best of second list teams. And for me, that's the first step that you need to do. Like, recruit the best outside top 10 or really foreign outside top 5 leagues. Build yourself up to a level when you're top 10, and then you can compete for those talents like Aboubakari Soumaré, like Leicester or whatnot. Like, build yourself up to that talent pool. So that's what personally I would do in the rebuild.
I mean, for me, I'm quite similar, but my philosophy is when you're picking backline players, as in your goalkeeper, your back four, or and your six, for example. My philosophy is communication is so key in those areas that you have to have. I personally build my backline European because I prefer just having the ability to say that everyone just is able to communicate. I love Gabriel, and I love like Brazilian defenders. But for me, if I'm gonna go safe, I build. So Lewis Duncan, Ben Godfrey is literally. I was going to say Esri Konsa, but Ben Godfrey works just as well. Lewis Duncan for me is a major player. I would have tried if it was 6 months ago. Tino Livramento would have been someone I tried to pick up, or maybe a Thierry Small. Young players that you can start to really build around. Both of you two love my love for Boubacar Kamara. I think he's perfect. I would also go for someone like Conor Gallagher, maybe someone in it. You can have Willock and Gallagher as eights, and then at the front line, I think you can go anywhere. So Maximin is great. I love Callum Wilson. Maybe someone different. Maybe if you can convince Rafinha to come, that would be a great central piece to your team. These are the kinds of names that as George was saying, you're building around nicking players off teams that you should be competing with. So building your team through actually looking at where you can sort of nick players off. So I think Palace you need to go to Palace because Palace have some great young talent. So Conor Gallagher, maybe Mark Way as well is someone you can look at. But yeah, that's the idea. Around in the same league, so there's not as much adaptation. Rimedi, welcome back. So we were just talking about recruitment as well. So we're going to move on to. I want to ask you about the Ralf Rangnick rumors. So how do you think he would fare in the Premier League?
So when it comes to Ralf Rangnick, I'm not as clued up as most people are, but I think for a team that has like an open project, like do whatever you want, you can go up, you can go down. I think Ralf Rangnick is perfect for it. Like, I think the reason why, as George mentioned earlier on, he rejected Milan is because he can't get that full type of control, and that's what he has at Lokomotiv Moscow. And we've seen what he's done at Leipzig and taken from the ground up to this team that they are now. So for a team that wants to have strategy, a German sporting director or director of football is perfect, in my opinion. We also see Michael Edwards, who's leaving Liverpool this year. He could be a shout as well.
That would be a hell of a pickup.
But I think Michael Edwards is different because he's more focused on the general day-to-day recruitment, football side. I think Ralf Rangnick can encompass everything. So I think he's a really good shout. But again, I think when it comes to hiring directors of football, I think it's much harder because it means that they need to leave the project that they're currently doing. So it could be a year and a half before we see him at Newcastle. But I think it's a really good move.
I mean, as Arsenal fans, we remember Sven Mislintat as well. So he didn't work out as well. Like, I don't think there's been a history of German directors of footballers coming over here and really succeeding. I can't remember one off the top of my head. If anyone, either you two or the comments can remind, because of the control thing, exactly what I was going to say. So, do you have any sort of fear about the excessive amount of control that he might demand, and sort of? I mean, a perfect example for me is Socrates over Soyuncu is a perfect example for me. Like, if you look at the recruitment, sometimes it just doesn't seem like they get the transition to the Premier League because of the different styles of football available.
With Ralf Rangnick, or them in general, they're like so set in their ways, and Ralf Rangnick generally becomes manager and like director at the same time. So that's an unprecedented amount of control, especially in the Prem. I don't think there's a team like that you have one director and manager in one. So I think if he comes, they're gonna have to try prepare for someone to dominate all of it, and then you can't really bring in a manager if he's gonna, unless it's his protege. Like I think Nagelsmann was his protege, so he'd either bring his protege and then allow him to take the reins after he's been coaching and director for a couple of years. But it is a risky thing to do if you're gonna straight away say under one man's philosophy, especially from all of, if he controls every single thing like negotiating and stuff.
I think just in terms of a club, like when you're looking at power, it's very risky to do that, like period. There's like a fundamental flaw of a club. Giving one man power or relying on a rebuild to one man is dangerous. But in terms of quality, Ralph Ragnick is quality. Like he will absolutely be like the manager that could take you from where you're at to competing at a top 10 level. And maybe you get the manager after him. Like that's totally cool. But for me, I refrain from recruiting anybody that's going to be the central responsible for kind of changing a club and a rebuild. For me, I'm a pragmatist. So like if it fails, I want somebody in charge that can replace the failure, or somebody like being an Arsenal fan and going through Emery and, different managers that, haven't worked out, and I had my thoughts previously about whether that was good ideas, but regardless, the point is if your manager doesn't work out in a rebuild, you want to be confident that people upstairs can replace him and replace him quick, right? The difficulty in recruiting a sporting director that does both is they think that they're right. And if they are failing, they will continue in that model. So for me, just to like diverge risk, and that's what I am as like a person, I would rather they separate it, but on the quality, like Ragnick would take you up to the level of competing at a top 10 level, and maybe you get the next person like a Jesse Marsh in a similar mold. Like there is a thought process that I could see. It's just I personally don't like one person having all that power.
I mean,
It's
do
true.
you guys think? Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Literally, I was coming back to ask a question already. So, I was thinking, is there a manager in world football that turns this down, this opportunity?
It's tough when you. Yeah, it's tough because when you have all this money, like being thrown in front of you, it's also a level of, do you sacrifice your reputation as a manager for all of this money? For example, if they hired Conte tomorrow, he has to make sure Newcastle stay up, and then make sure that Newcastle are a consistent top 10 team, and then qualify for Europe. Like Conte has always been that final touch. So someone like Conte, I'm not sure. So there are a lot of managers that would turn it down. But similarly, I don't think one of those top level managers, I don't think Newcastle should aim for them. I think you should aim for someone like a Graham Potter, like a Jesse Marsh, like managers that are young, that have their style of play and that can impose it onto everyone in the team. So
I think they should
go on.
Sorry. No, keep going.
No, I was just gonna conclude that managers it's a very difficult thing, because in general in life, when you're throwing so much money, how can you say no? If you're moving on to a new position, how can you say no to that? So again, it's what manager can say, okay, I want to leave the current project that I'm at and go to a team like Newcastle that I can do whatever I want at, but there will be scrutiny down the line. And do I have patience to go through everything?
Yeah, for me, I think they should go after, like, maybe not young, but a coach with rep or a good reputation, like someone. If you do go down the Conte route, which I think is the wrong move, he would still he would be able to bring in bigger players than you guys generally would be able to bring in. So it could help in that way. But in general, I think Conte is the wrong move. They're basically new now. They're a new team, new entity. So bringing in Conte is the wrong thing. But like, even though I don't think Vieira is the best tactically, what he's done in terms of being able to bring in a guy like Guehi Anderson, not many other managers they could have done the same thing. But I think they should go for like a young manager who's tactically like good, like a Marsh, a Gallardo.
You know what it is for me, Chris? Like I talk about this on this channel like a lot, where in my opinion, football clubs need to start making decisions that are built in their roots. So what I mean by that is, look, Vieira you may have questions about his actual level, right? But the one thing that Vieira did, which is why he's semi-successful at Palace, is he recruited fast-pacing wingers and as well as exciting transition threats. Like that's the bedrock of Crystal Palace, as a historical club. If I'm looking at Newcastle, right, I'm looking at strong athletes in the middle. I'm looking at, quick transition encounters and just absolute efficiency, like in terms of their history. So recruit in your bedrock of what you've done for a club for years. And whether or not the manager is necessarily of the requisite quality, make your recruitments about what has worked for you in the past. And that's why I think Lewis Dunk, Ben Godfrey are just unbelievable defensive additions. Like when I look at classic Newcastle teams, they can defend in a low block, but they spring with speed. I look at, some of the Pape Cisse era, like some of those greater kind of successes, and they were just
Even going back
transition
further,
threats,
yeah. Even going back further, it's just from the Shearers,
From Shearer.
Solanos.
Shearer is the he's one of the most efficient to ever even play in the league.
Period. And so for me, Newcastle are efficient movers, and so recruit in that fashion. But I don't know. Like I wanted to ask, like Rimedi, like if you had your choice, like, and I kind of listed my signings and my manager of what I would prefer. Like how do you feel that they should rebuild in what manager, but also like maybe signings, and like what philosophy do you think they should go with?
Yeah, I completely agree with what you said. We all know Newcastle to be this team that can kill you on the transition, but Newcastle are also a team with flair. You remember Ben Arfa, you remember Laurent Robert, David Ginola, all these types of players. I wasn't alive to watch Ginola or Laurent Robert like that, but I've heard great stories about them, and they have a lot of flair as well. They want to show off for the fans as well. So you also want to get players that can do that, that can entertain. They have one in Alan Saint-Maximin. Why not get is that Anthony? Is that how you pronounce his name?
From Ajax.
Stop saying Ajax, man.
I'm doing it just to annoy you now.
Like these types of players, but also I was also really big on getting experience. So like you said, Lewis Dunk. I'm also big on. They've also been really linked to James Tarkowski from Burnley. Just these big brute centre backs, but they can play as well. So these types of players, but I would also mix it around loads of youth players that you can mold and you can manage their egos as well. Because a lot of people have also said, "Oh, who's going to be Newcastle's Robinho?" But why would you get that type of player when they don't fit the philosophy? Their peak will not last when all the other players' peak come up as well. So I wouldn't get someone like Coutinho that everyone's mentioned. So
Martial,
exactly.
no.
all these types of players. Martial maybe, but Coutinho definitely not.
Did you see the team, by the way? That team on Twitter.
Yeah.
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Like, it was
What was
ridiculous.
that pivot?
Yeah, it was.
Not even just a pivot. It was like a three at the back with Coutinho left wing back and Sterling right wing back.
No, it's crazy. But I think fundamentally, like Rimedi, like my big thing when I recruit those players, like Anthony, flair player, open up the attack, right? When you're looking at John McGinn, domestic talent that can maybe help Abubakar Kamara, who's at a pivot, a very important position. Surround him with a Tarkowski, or a Lewis Dunk, Ben Godfrey, a personal favorite of mine. But like when you look at that, Anthony, if he struggles to come back, and he will, I promise you, you have to deal with Ben Godfrey and John McGinn in terms of covering that space. So even your right backs, who are poor options in my opinion, and you'll need a replacement there, you can let that guy thrive. And for me, it's about making purchases for players that have ambition. Like my one worry with Martial, why I think he's a decent player, is for me, I don't want to take punts in a rebuild on players that are having a step back in their career. Look at players that want to take a step forward. So that's, Lewis Dunk, they want to take the next step in terms of the English squad. Tarkowski, Boubacar Kamara, John McGinn, like they're all purchases that want to take the next step. They haven't arrived and fallen down in terms. So like your Martials, I would worry. Coutinho, I would worry. Like those aren't, in my opinion, smart additions. Like, do you agree with Project Youth philosophy in that sense?
Oh, spot on. Like a few days ago, I made a video on TikTok on what I would do as Newcastle sporting director, and I said I was looking at players like Noah Lang. I was looking at players like Sekou Koita from Salzburg, who has an unbelievable track record. I was looking at Kamardine from Rennes. These types of players that can wow you, but you also have to bed it in with experience and Premier League type of experience. I love John McGinn as a player, what he represents, the industrious. He suits the Premier League to a T. And if I'm Newcastle and I want to build my team around Joe Willock, Saint-Maximin, get these types of players in that have a mixture of youth, but that can also say, I've been in the Premier League and I know what to do when the chips are down.
I mean, I wanna ask everyone, so how long did it took Man City 4 years to win the Premier League? for the first time. They bought in 2008. They won it in 2012. What do you guys, if you're taking a 5-year period, how do you think that the next 5 years goes for Newcastle United?
I could get them challenging in 3 years for top 4.
We know you could, but will they?
Well, no, because look, if you make the additions that I said in 3 years, I think Newcastle, with the spine of their team, they compete for a top 4. They're certainly in a Leicester conversation for those that want to compete in terms of their squad quality. Like you do those additions, and then you supplement with more additions in that time period. I mean, it all depends on how much money do you guys actually have, right? Like I'm trying to work out what a budget. I would expect 120 million pounds minimum. Like when I look at even Man City and some of the big Everton windows, they've had at least 100 million pounds to spend. And so that's what I'm looking at as a transfer kitty for 3 seasons. And in my opinion, if you inject 300 million pounds into that squad with what they have, that should absolutely be able to compete for Europe and for Europa League. Like I don't think they're that far, particularly because I think what you guys have going for you is you have a good front line. You really do. And for me, that's the crucial part of staying up as well, like goals. The next step in that is midfield solidity. Once you get that, now you're competing. Then you just need a big defense, and that's when top 4 becomes possible. Like for me, those are the steps that you have to take in those years. And so I would take 3 years to do those steps. Like improve your midfield, improve your defense, and then you get your 3rd year, you're able to, in my opinion, challenge for top 4 if you continue to make those proper decisions. And maybe you get a different manager in that time period. Maybe you use the first 2 years to receive the players, and then you get your big Jesse Marsh type manager to lead the Newcastle rebuild. But I don't think it's out of this realm of possibility to kind of get you guys challenging for top 4 within the next 3 seasons, in my opinion. I don't think you can do it earlier, I'll be honest, because I think there's a lot that needs to happen and for some people to fall out.
And the teams at the top are good.
Yeah,
they are. But also football changes quick, guys. Like I'm looking at West Ham, and you just need one great player really in Declan Rice that has taken them from top 10 challengers to competing in Europe. Like that boy on his own has really changed the fabric of West Ham in terms of what they're able to do. You make a couple really good additions like Anthony, if he ends up being a really great superstar, like some of these youth prospects that you're saying, or we're saying really to take a bet on, if they really bang, that gets you out of a huge, huge hole. So yeah, I think it's 3 seasons. Maybe some people think it's 5, but in my opinion, you make smart decisions like that in terms of what we were looking at recruitment. I think they could challenge for top 4. I don't think they get it, but they can challenge for sure.
Before I go to CK and then Rimedi, I wanna put one question to both of you. As Arsenal fans, we know the problems that we've had with getting rid of talent to create spots for the players that we wanted to come in. We've got the likes of Nketiah, Lacazette, etc. Do you see that being a problem with players at Newcastle, or is that just us because we have players on such ridiculous wages? And then obviously your 5-year prediction for them.
So I'll go quick, but like with the big wages, it's hard to sell anybody. But at Newcastle, they don't have the many players on 100k that we had. Mustafi, Kolasinac, all these guys on 100+ K, and you can't really convince someone to go somewhere else and get something less. With Newcastle, they'll probably sell their players like Shelby's, and might not sell him, but I'm just saying Shelby for an example. But say you sell him, I don't know how much he's on. Let's say he's on 50k a week. Another team may likely put him on 50k a week, so you won't have that wage issue. But compared to an Arsenal, I think it'll be easier for them to sell, and I don't think they'll need to sell all straight away. And for the 5-year thing, I think it depends on who you get first, because they could go and get a Conte and then he'll be about for 2 years. Whatever he does in that 2 years may not set you up well for the 2 years after that. So it depends on. I can't really give a 5-year plan. If they do what I would do, maybe in 5 years they'd be above United. But I think in general you can't really give a plan when you don't know what's there. You know they have money, but like for us, I could give us a plan. Like Arsenal, I could give like a prediction for the next 5 years. But at Newcastle, I literally don't even know if they're gonna upgrade the training ground next week. So you don't know.
It looks tragic.
Which they need to do. Which they need to do.
They
It's
really do.
terrible.
It's tragic. Did you see those pictures? That video of the guy going through
It
that?
literally looked like that Goal movie, and that Goal
Yeah.
movie was 16 years ago.
It made Coney look like Dubai Airport. It was ridiculous.
ridiculous.
Like it was mad.
But now, at least with them building their training ground, they don't need to sell Anelka to build their training ground. They just have the money.
Yeah.
But that's why for me, CK, like I look at like how much money do you think you need to invest in the current team to get them up to the level that you want? So if top 4 challenging is what you think, how much money do you think is reasonable to expect that challenge after being spent? In my opinion, 300 million pounds is a lot of freaking money. Like you can get some serious like investment in there, and I don't think it's unrealistic with who you have as owners, Rimedi, to expect £100 million budget. In fact, I think that's being very conservative.
Very conservative. Because sorry to interrupt you, because Newcastle, from the balance side, they're running in a profit right now.
Yeah.
So if you're running at a profit,
exactly,
which most clubs are not, like they can probably. I saw a video of Simon Jordan, who was the ex-Crystal Palace coach.
Yeah,
they would say, yes. Who said Newcastle can spend 500, 600, 700 million pounds and offset the losses in a few years, but because they have so much money even now. So 300 million pounds, I say that's a reasonable amount of money they can spend in the first year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I think first year, but like my point is like in 3 years, I think what level of investment do you need to change a team? I think 300 million for me is the threshold where
300 million you could make like one of the best teams around.
Like if you average that, it's like 30 million a signing, and what can you could get a lot of players for 30 million from around Europe and all that kind of stuff.
Arsenal haven't spent 300 million pounds in the time that Mikel has been manager. So like if I'm looking at like, and I like they're not at the same starting level. Like I'm not trying to say that, but the idea to transform a team and like really like shift out players, you know what I mean? Like have a rebuild where you really take out those that aren't needed and come back in. 300 million pounds for me is an excellent amount of money that you should be expecting change.
If you really look at what they already have, they've got a
striker that will get them goals. They got a left wing who has a secondary goal threat. They've got a goal scoring midfielder. Okay,
they have a decent keeper in Darlow. They have because we had 4. We had Emil, Saka, Oba, and Tierney as our 4. We were here before Arteta started spending money. So when you have your 4 players, like they could spend more than us and do close to what we've done with our team.
Do you know what it is, Chris? For me, you need to recruit as a new rebuild. You will get the technical leader in every third of the pitch that you want in your rebuild, but you also need like a secondary option within there, and that's when the team really changes, right? So like, you know, I don't think you need to replace your goalkeeper, but like you need a defensive leader for sure, right? Get another secondary option, whether that's Dunk plus Tarkovsky, you're cooking, or Godfrey plus Dunk, very good. In terms of your midfield, McGinn plus a Kamara, like you've got your midfield leader, but you've also got a secondary person to help out. In attack, I don't really think you need it. Like if you want depth, you can totally get depth, but I think with what you have in Alan St. Maximin and Callum Wilson, you've got an excellent front line that just needs that last little bit in terms of an extra little bit of flair and opening the other side of the attack. So I really don't think Newcastle's as far as what people think too.
I don't think they're as close as some people think though as well. Some people are already telling me that they're top 6. And I'm like, top 6? They haven't done anything. Like literally haven't done.
I've seen podcasts saying that they're going to replace us in the top 6. Okay, let's just brother, no. Okay, stop that. Yeah. The thing is with the Newcastle and the top 6 stuff, I understand where it comes because you get the money, of course, but to do that, you need to do something first. So I'm evidence first, and then we'll talk about it. Win a trophy, get European football, and we can talk. But for now,
you don't have to win a trophy to be top 6, by the way. Spurs.
No, I know, but no. There's a difference between top 6 and big 6.
Yeah, but Spurs didn't win on. That's what I'm just saying.
What's
your 5-year plan? Your 5 year.
Just quickly. What I thought was I agreed with the idea that 5 years they can qualify for the Champions League, because I also thought about it with the like the top four right now are very good, like very, very, very good. Man United not so good, but the other three very, very good. So I also thought about the idea that it might take some time to break into that. So I said by 2024 they should be challenging for the Europa League, and I said by 2026 top four, that has to be their target. Like George said, if you have a spine and you have the technical leaders in each third of the pitch, I think you can really do well. And hopefully we're going to see that at Arsenal, but hopefully the mighty Magpies, we're going to go to the top in like the next 5 to 7 to 10 years. That's what I really believe in the project, but we can't say anything right now because we don't know anything. We're just guesstimating for the future. But once we start seeing some recruitment, I think we could see some semblance of a project, and I think this project is about to go bang.
I love how, I'm sorry, Karen, but I love how you said you're an Arsenal fan, then you say we, the mighty Magpies.
Come on, man.
Before, because Remy, I think has to go, but before you do go, just make sure you plug your shit, man, because I want you to make sure that you get your stuff out there.
I don't want to toot my own horn, but I think a lot of people kind of know me right now.
Man. I want you to as well, bro. Do your shit.
So, thank you. So on TikTok, if you guys don't know me, Rimedi, I just post football videos. Again, Twitter, Rimedi, but the first one is an I. First I is a 1.
There you go.
And I have a YouTube channel, Rimedi. Come check me out. I make really good videos. Hopefully by the end of this week, I have a video coming out about the Premier League, the broadcasting rights, which stopped Newcastle from having the takeover. And the next one is going to be about the Newcastle takeover. So yeah, thank you guys for having me on. You guys have been the best, honestly. Thank you guys. Made my transition so easy. I really appreciate it.
Description, by the way, all of them.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you guys. Take care of yourselves.
Take
care, mate.
Take care.
Right, before all the rest of us head off, I want to talk about one thing in specific. I mean, two things, but the first thing is more important for me. There are two ways this, in terms of youth investment and where they go from here. There's two ways this could go. They could go Cobham, and they can go, we're going to get the best talent in the country, and we're going to sell them off if we need to and get the best players in. We're going to make profit in our youth, and we're going to get our best players in, better players in to supplement our first team squad. Or you can go the other way, the Hale End way, where we promote our youth and take care of them and make sure that they're loaned out, and when they're ready, they get straight into the 11. Which, if you're in charge of Newcastle right now, which way do you want to go? I know everyone's answer is going to be, but I want you to explain why. So go for it, George.
Sorry, say that again.
I said, I was saying, would you, if you were in charge of Newcastle, would you rather go the Cobham Academy route or the Hale End Academy route?
I think for myself, like, I think you build the bedrock off domestic recruitment, and I think that's the big change that we've really done well at Arsenal in terms of our youth recruitment. And so for me, you kind of go the Cobham route with recruiting domestically, really. But I think it's a balance, right, Karen? Like, I mean, even when you look at things like, does data analysis belong in recruitment? It's never 100%. This is the same thing with general recruitment models. I think Cobham is, an unbelievable example to look towards, because other than Hale End, they're my top one by a country mile, with City very, very close to Hale and Cobham, in my opinion. But for me, those are the top academy setups and the top recruitment setups in the country. So I think replicating those things are never a bad idea. But again, for me, I would do a mixture of both. Like, I think if you had to choose one, gun to my head, domestic recruitment for me guarantees the most impact in the short term, which is what you might need in a rebuild, because we don't have time in rebuild. So yeah, if I had to choose, domestic recruitment, but really you should be combining the two, like how we did, recruit Mika Bareth, but also recruit Salah Adin. like have a little bit of combination play as like a little mantra to look towards. But yeah.
So CK, I was just asking George, if between the Cobham model or the Hale End model of youth academies, because let's be real, those are the two, and maybe United's academy as well. These are the premium academies in the country right now. If you're Newcastle, where do you model your academy off? Because they're obviously going to plow money. Obviously, City's academy as well. So these are the main academies in the country. So where would you put your philosophy at if you're Newcastle right now in terms of youth and their academy?
I think Helen were kind of smart with like aligning themselves with England, as England pushed up. Helen have pushed up as well, and then you see the fruition with the English coaches like Betsy right now. They're top of the league, if I remember correctly, and they're beating everybody convincingly. So Helen are the top youth academy right now and producing well. But Chelsea have been top for years and years and winning the league, winning even Champions League. So they're both great. I think you have to combine both in the sense that Chelsea seem like they're really not afraid to let anybody go. And they always replace their youth and main team. But like, you need to combine both in the sense that recruit domestically and recruit in Europe, but don't get too hung on a youth academy prospect, because a lot of the academy prospects in all the teams in England right now came from Chelsea. So they always move their players on. So, and Newcastle need to like find a way to get the money revolving. So the Chelsea method might be a great one and keep the money revolving through selling the academy. But they're both great. They're both the different ends of the spectrum. But I think Halen's better right now, but you never know. Using both together could be a very great method to me. But either way, you can't really go wrong.
Right. I mean, I'm just going to sum up with this. So we're just going to do final thoughts. So I want to talk about, so you can do the moral argument, the argument for competition, just sum up whatever you want to talk about in terms of final thoughts on this before we head out.
So final thoughts for me is, I think the moral argument's going to be a little bit disingenuous for some, but for other fans like myself, I definitely draw a line for what type of evil I'm willing to accept and be party to. I'm not naive enough to not think that venture capitalists aren't evil in their own right, but for me, I do draw a line for how evil I'm willing to accept, to endorse, and that's a personal decision. But in terms of a competitive edge, I really separate the two arguments, because I feel morally that's a very personal argument to fans, and that's going to be very personal. But in terms of the decision about Newcastle, in terms of the product, the Premier League product, there really is no con to what's happening. It's capitalism at its best. You're increasing money in terms of trickle-down effects to other teams in the league. You're increasing competitiveness in the league. You're increasing notoriety in the league. You're increasing kind of another competitor higher up in the league. So there really is no business fault for me. Morally, there might be a separate argument, but for me in business, and even from a product standpoint, really becomes disingenuous for me to not think that it's anything but positive for the Premier League.
CK?
For me, like, final thoughts on the... Wait, am I muted?
No, you're good.
Okay, yeah, for me, like, final thoughts on the Newcastle takeover. I think people shouldn't get ahead of themselves. I know it's hard not to when you get someone with 320 billion coming in, but like, I think they should give themselves time, because it took time for them to get down to this level. So it will take time to potentially rise back. I think it's a great prospect. I think it's great that there's more money coming in, more eyes, better for the lower teams. Like, the disparity between money will increase and decrease at the same time, because the money will end up trickling down. It increases the TV money in general for English teams, because you now have new interest from other teams. I think for Newcastle, this perspective is great, that they can be great again, and then that coming with the competition just makes the Prem even better. And for your team to be the best, you have to beat the best. So for me, it's good because for me, wanting Arsenal to become so good, you need more of the best, and then your point is better. So yeah, like it's business-wise, it's great, but morally, not much in football nowadays. Morally, is even good, and I don't necessarily like it morally, but like they were gonna get somebody. Like they're always gonna. When football's this big, they're gonna get somebody. So.
Right. So before I go to our local robot to get his new skill, that is promoting the channel that he's gotten very good at this moment in time, I'm just gonna give. You all right, George?
Yeah.
You look dead, man. What happened to you?
I'm fatigued, man. I've been up all night with my dog.
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
yeah,
Jesus. But yeah, I'll just give some final thoughts. So, the first thing I'm going to say is there's a difference between what a public investment fund is worth and how much they're going to put in. So the public investment firm itself is worth, I think, 320 billion is the number quoted, and yes, it's a massive number. The amount that they're going to put in is, let's be real, maybe 1.5, maybe 2 billion in total, not more than that in I would say the next 5 to 7, maybe even 10 years. So we have to look at these numbers and say, okay, you've got 320 million, but it's a public investment fund, which means they're basically venture capitalists that are involved in multiple different projects. They might buy other clubs. There's another issue that is in case of say there was a rumor. I personally think this is silly, but there's a rumor that if they buy Inter Milan, that Newcastle may be the Salzburg to Milan's Leipzig, which I think is ridiculous. But are they going to form a network of clubs like Man City do? So yeah, there's lots of different issues, and we have to remember that we are at the beginning of this, and to put too many assumptions right now when you're a day removed from it being completed is a bit much for me. The final thing I'll mention is I have a soft spot for Newcastle. I think a lot of top 6 fans do, even a lot of football fans around the country do, because they're a team that are I can say that their fan base makes you want to root for them. They're not a fan base that unless they turn they morph into something different. But at the moment, I do like Newcastle fans. I do like the club and the ethos. So good for them. And on that note, we're just going to do some brief social things. So go on, George. You've got it on lock at this point. Go and promote the channel.
Yeah, you can find me personally at George VAFC, but make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Find us Ball Over Passion on YouTube, but on the Twitter, you can follow us at BoP Footy. And yes, I said the Twitter, but make sure that you guys engage. We're growing slowly, but we want to make sure that we can push out more content for you. So make sure that you guys let us know what we can do to improve. Make sure what you guys let us know what we can do well and keep doing. But yeah, man, like we've got a lot of content coming up, and they get the international breaks kind of wrapping up, so everyone can kind of go back to normal. I feel like everyone has a little bit of like crazy periods in terms of the international break. I know I took some time off personally from Twitter, but like I think we all need sometimes these breaks. But I think Arsenal have done really well. I don't know if people are keeping up, but in terms of goal and assist contributions from players that are out there, people are informed. So it's nice to see no big injuries. So yeah, man, like I'm excited. I'm looking forward to the next round of fixtures too.
But yeah, before we go, follow me at Pure CKK, follow Willow at the One Willow, follow Curran at Curran BoP, follow Z at Priv Arsenal _Z, and thank you again, Rimedi, for coming on. Follow Rimedi at R1MEDI on Twitter and Rimedi on TikTok. But yeah,
nicely done.
Check
him out.
I replied to you guys now.
Please, can we? I'm gonna say this right now. CK to 1K. Okay, this is my pet project, man. I want CK in 4 digits. Please, guys, let's get CK to 1K. But yeah, my name's Karan.
I'll still rate you,
Passion. It's been Ball of a Passion, and we'll see you soon. Thanks. Bye now.